Hello folks, Scott here with the new welcome to the new Hero Studio kit subscription. This is of course the card kit of the month for June of 2024. This is the first month that this subscription series has been available. You can subscribe to the card kit of the month. Looks like we get 5 inks in this kit. These are all core inks. We got Dusty Blue, Stonewash, Peony, Amethyst, and Pitch Black. And I have to say, there appears to be quite a lot of stuff in this kit. Let's dig into our stamps first. We've got this big Heroscapes cloud stamp here. This is a 6 by 8 inch stamp set with clouds and a telephone pole, a telephone wire, lots of birds standing in line, a squirrel, some flying birds, thank you, hello, greeting, sending love, friend. These are 2 cloud layering stamps. So this would be the background and this would be the highlights on the cloud. That's a 6 by 8 inch stamp set. And then we get a little 4 by 6 inch stamp set. That's all sorts of sentiments on it with this nice little row of houses down on the bottom. There's a little bench and light post, a single house, a little car, and all sorts of sentiments here. We've got the sun and clouds, birds, a bus, complete little scenes. There's another card there. Hope to see you soon. Drop by anytime. My door's always open. See you around. I'm just a phone call away. Hello, neighbor. Welcome. Come visit sometimes. A second stamp set. And then, of course, we get some dies. So this die set will cut out all of the images and looks like the sentiments from our main stamp set here. We also get a layering stencil with inserts. This is a nice cityscape layering stencil. So you can stencil in the buildings themselves and then, of course, stencil in their windows as well. 3 great city skylines. I'm sure there's a layering up to be done there. Keep the bag for that. We also get some city transfer, rub-on transfers. Little medallion here. Looks like ships and some cornices. Very city-oriented, very grungy over here. Look, and there's more power lines right here. We get 2 sheets of these, the Hero Arts rub-ons. And then we get some papers. These are 8.5 by 5.5. We get 2 sheets of this kind of a shattered silver and 2 sheets of pitch black cardstock, 2 sheets of silver glitter cardstock, and 2 sheets of a nice matte silver cardstock. That's 8 sheets of cardstock, 2 stamp sets, double stencil, rub-ons, 5 ink pads, matching dies. I think this is a heck of a send-off for the new Hero Studios. I'm sure most of you have seen this stuff. Let's start making some cards, see what we come up with. Congratulations to Hero Arts for their new Hero Studio subscriptions. And here we go, folks. Here are my 10 cards for the new Hero Studio card kit of the month for June of 2024. This is extremely late this month. I'm so sorry. These kits, I think, went out a little late this month. Mine didn't get mailed to me until the 10th. And I also took a week off to go home to Kansas to celebrate my mother's 90th birthday party. Here's a little pic of her at her party. She's doing great, especially for 90 years old. Happy birthday, Mom. Let's dig right in. I thought this was a very interesting kit. It's the telephone pole kind of threw me a little bit just because all the cables in New York City are buried underground. So we don't even have telephone poles around here. But I did like the birds on a wire motif. So I gathered that the Stonewash and Dusty Blue inks were intended for the cloud stamps. But wouldn't Amethyst and Peony work as well? So for my first card we have A hello card with birds on a wire. So on a panel of Neenah Solar White cardstock, I stamped the cloud stamps with the amethyst and peony inks and added a little ink blending of the same inks over the rest of the panel. I did add a touch of the pitch black ink blended at the top edge to give this a little bit more of a dusky feel. I stamped the telephone pole, the wires, and the birds using the pitch black ink. That is some extremely black ink. I love it. It easily covered over the background stamping. Now, I'm not sure why, but I chose to add the power cables to the bottom of the insulators on the poles instead of the tops. I think I just liked that aesthetic better than the cables coming from the top of the insulators. Of course, that's wrong, but what do I know? We don't have telephone poles in New York City. I stamped the sentiment using VersaFine Onyx Black ink and embossed it with some clear embossing powder for a little texture and shine. And I added a few stars at the top with a white gel pen and a glitter pen for a little sparkle. I trimmed the panel to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I glued that to an A2 white card base. I liked that I could curve the line of bird stamps to match the curve of the cable. And I kind of like the straightforward simplicity here, all on a 1-layer card. I guess this is a fairly unique set of cloud stamps. There's a good amount of space at the top of the stamp. It's barely 3.5 inches long. Maybe I could use these stamps to fill in a whole card with clouds. So for my next card we have, thank you. Nice thank you card with blue clouds. I really like this one. On an A2 panel of white cardstock, I stamped the 2 cloud stamps, moving the clouds right up to the edge of the panel. I used stone wash and the dusty blue inks. Then I rotated the panel and I did the same on the bottom edge, now the top edge. I did try to pay attention to any overlaps in the center, but I was able to avoid anything truly unseemly. Now, though these bottom clouds are technically upside down, it's kind of hard to tell. Just looks like a bunch of clouds. I stamped the sentiment and the birds on 110-pound cardstock with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and embossed them all with clear embossing powder, and then I die cut them out with the matching dies. Gotta love those sentiment dies. I die cut 2 blanks for the sentiment and 1 blank for the birds and glued them together. So I trimmed the cloud panel to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I added some sheer shimmer spritz for some overall sparkle. I think you can see that there. I glued the panel to an A2 card base and the sentiment and the birds to the card front. Almost a 1-layer card. This feels very Jonathan Livingston Seagull to me. Thank you. So my eyes wandered over to the city stencil, and I wondered how I could make the windows appear on the inked-in silhouettes of the buildings. I guess you could use embossing powder or gel or paste, but can you use the knockout parts of the stencils, and that's the window parts, to help ink blend a sky around the buildings? So many questions. That led to my next card, which is City Lights, Starry Nights, and Endless Sights. And on the inside, welcome to the hustle and bustle. So on an A2 panel of white cardstock, I secured the knockout part of the largest skyline down to the panel, and I blended in the sky above with peony, amethyst, and pitch black inks. I had decided to use white embossing powder for the windows, so I didn't worry about getting ink in the window parts of the stencil. Once the sky was inked in, I added the open silhouette stencil to the window stencil, and I pounced Versamark ink through the windows and then embossed them with white embossing powder. Then I removed the knockout window stencil and I ink blended the buildings using Hero Arts Contour ink. That's the lightest gray ink that I own. Now, I repeated the same for the lower buildings without having to blend in the sky. The darker ink will cover over any of the extra contour ink down below. I used Concord & Ninth Dove ink for the front buildings after embossing the windows in white. Now, I trimmed that panel down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I added a thin black mat before gluing them down to an A2 white card base. I stamped the sentiment on some 40-pound vellum using VersaFine ink, and I embossed that with clear embossing powder. I fussy cut that sentiment and glued it to the front of the card with small dots of liquid glue. I added some stars in the sky with a white gel pen, and I stamped the sentiment on the inside using the pitch black ink. Now, I liked being able to use the knockout stencil to blend in a sky, and the white embossing powder worked really well through the window stencils. This is, again, another 1-layer card. Now, trying to figure out how to use those stencils hurt my brain a little, so I turned to the neighborhood message stamp set for our next card. And we have, "Come visit sometime." I arranged and stamped all the individual images using VersaFine ink on Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I colored them all with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. It's a pleasant little scene, highlighted with some silver gel pen on the tires and the bumpers of the automobiles. A simple suggestion of a road and lawn pulls the whole scene together. Now, boy, those are some tiny images to color. Makes me a little wary of the big stamp with 6 buildings. Now, I die cut the watercolored panel with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. That's 4½ by 3¼ I added a blue mat that's 4¾ by 3½ and a thin black mat, which is 4�7/8 by 3�5/8, and glued those all to a white card base. Lastly, I stamped the sentiment with pitch black ink. This uses all 7 of the small individual stamps in this set, and I love the bucolic scene that this suggests. Come visit me sometime. But I don't live there. I live there. Now, that was a nice break from our stencils, but I started thinking about using those stencils for an actual black silhouette of a city skyline. And that gave us a Welcome to the Neighborhood card with a simple black skyline. On a panel of gray cardstock, I stenciled in the medium skyline using the pitch black ink. I reversed that stencil for a different look. You notice that this is on the right side here, this building is on the left side here. The front and the back of the stencils will give you 2 different views. When that was dry, I pounced Versamark ink through the windows and embossed them with white embossing powder. After heat setting that, I replaced the stencil and spattered some stars in the sky using some Doc Martin bleed-proof white opaque watercolor. I stamped the sentiment using unicorn white ink, and I embossed that with white embossing powder. I used another Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die and did some partial die cutting to adjust the shape of that panel to 5¼ by 3¼ I was having a hard time figuring out how to use the metallic paper in this kit, and I figured that the silver glitter cardstock might add a nice sparkle to this nighttime card. I cut the glitter card to 5½ by 3½ glued it to the back of the die cut panel, and then down to an A2 pitch black card base. There are plenty of uses for that great pitch black cardstock in our kit. I like this a lot. It's pretty simple to accomplish, and I really like that black-white palette. Welcome to the neighborhood. And then there's the rub-on sheets. Lots of urban motifs here, but I'm a little thrown by the ship's mast and all of the rigging. I don't know. Regardless, the rub-ons will provide us with a perfect background for a multimedia card. So for card number 6, we have I'm just a phone call away. Hello, with birds on a wire. So I cut out a card-sized panel from the rub-on sheet from the bottom right side. That puts the ship's mast in the mid-left of the card where I planned to put the telephone pole. Now, I rubbed that onto an A2 panel of ivory cardstock. I used some texture paste through one of the stencils on the bottom right. You can see some window shapes down here. And when it was dry, I used some watered down Distress Oxide frayed burlap ink to give the paste a little color. And I added a little of that over the whole background for a little color variation. The rub-ons took that watercolor just fine. I was a little afraid that it wouldn't dry on them, but it worked beautifully on those rub-ons. I wanted a little more variation on the stencil, so I added some Gold Treasure metallic gilding polish on the bottom right as well. That adds some great shine to the grunge. When everything was dry, I die cut the panel with a Hero Arts rounded rectangle infinity die, and I lightly sanded the edges for a little bit more distressed. I stamped the pole on more ivory cardstock, and I extended the stamp to make the pole longer. It's actually 5 1/8 inches long, and you can see the tiniest little jog here where I added length to the pole. I die cut the pole using partial die cutting to adjust for the added length. I added some black baker's twine to the pole for the cables. I'm keeping them hanging from the bottom, no matter how wrong it is. I attached the telephone pole to the card front with foam tape, arranging the cables in front and behind. I glued the ends of the twine around the back edges of the panel and glued the panel down to a craft card base with the corners rounded. I stamped the birds on more ivory cardstock with VersaFine ink. I embossed them with clear embossing powder before die cutting them out. I picked 2 of the birds to add to the wire and foam taped them to the card front with spots of glue where they sit on the twine. I stamped the sentiment on more ivory cardstock, embossed it with clear embossing powder, then die cut it with an old Spellbinder's decal edge die. I distressed that with more of the frayed burlap Distress Oxide ink and some pitch black ink and added it to the card front with more tape. Finally, I added the Hello stamp to the left side with VersaFine Onyx Black ink embossed with clear embossing powder. This is a classic example of a multimedia card. I love the 3-dimensional quality of the birds on the telephone cables, and the rub-on worked perfectly for a card like this. I'm just a phone call away, tweet, tweet. I was still thinking of ways to make those window stencils work, and I thought an old ink resist technique might work. And so we have a Wish You Were Here card. I wanted to use the clouds with the stencils this time, but I wanted the clouds to feel softer, so I stamped the first cloud stamp a few times using a blending brush to add dusty blue ink to the stamp. It's nice and suggestive instead of hard stamped images. I really like that. Now, I pounced Versamark embossing ink through the 2 window stencils. I did lighter on the back buildings and heavier on the front buildings, and I let that dry completely. The Versamark ink should grab color differently than just the paper. I stenciled the buildings using contour ink and Dove ink, and sure enough, the embossing ink grabbed more of the color and gave a really nice suggestion of the windows. All of this is very soft. I trimmed the panel with a rounded rectangle die and the mat with the next larger die, and I glued those to a white card base. I did round the corners of this card base, but only on the right side. I kind of liked leaving the left side square. I stamped the sentiment with VersaFine ink and embossed it with clear embossing powder. And I stamped the birds from the neighborhood stamp set with pitch black ink. It's kind of a gray day in the city here, but I like the softer nature of everything on this card, especially that light suggestion of clouds. So I guess it's time I bit the bullet and tackled that neighborhood stamp with 6 buildings. And we have Hope to see you soon. This is stamped on, that stamp is stamped on Bristol Smooth cardstock with VersaFine Onyx Black ink, colored lovingly with my Zig markers. I really like the White House at the end of the block. The sentiment, again, is stamped and embossed for a little texture and a little shine. The panels cut with a lawn fawn stitched rectangle die, matted with black before gluing to an A2 card base. This stamp is terrific if you want to take the time to do some terrifically detailed coloring. Hope to see you soon. It's a lovely little neighborhood. So a couple of puns occurred to me while I was working on those cards, so I thought I'd try and see if I can make them work. And we have, sorry I haven't called, with a broken telephone line. This is another simple black and white card, but I love the irony here. The lines are down, so I haven't called, but I thought snail mail might be a better way to communicate. That makes me giggle. Very straightforward here. Pitch black ink on Nina white cardstock, printed sentiment using my Silhouette software and the Smoothie Shop and by Tangerines fonts. I thought those were very close to the sentiments in our kit. That's die cut with a lawn fawn stitched rectangle die and some sparks drawn in with a Pigma Micron pen. Yes, my telephone lines are still hanging below, but I figured once I went there, I should just keep going. This is a great card for checking in with a friend. Sorry I haven't called. So I combined a few techniques for this last card, and I also modified this stamp just enough to give me this fun little pun. And we have, how the hell are you? I did the cloud stamp on a panel of Bristol Smooth cardstock using a blending brush to add ink, and then I stamped the street stamp in a curve to create our hill, a simple rainbow palette for our houses colored with my Zig markers. I printed the sentiment using the same fonts and added a single house below. This panel is trimmed to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, matted on a green and black cardstock and down to a white card base. Now that street stamp is right a little bit over 3 3/4 inches long, so curving it like this helps it fit on a portrait-oriented card. Again, I really like the soft clouds. How the hell are you? And that concludes my 10 cards made with the first ever Hero Studio card kit of the month. I'm pleased to see this first round of subscription options with the new Hero Studio, and I'm thrilled with this wide assortment of cards. This kit is still available at Hero Arts. If I've given you any inspiration on how many ways you can use this kit, you can still grab one for yourself. Please use my links in the description down below. When you do go shopping at Hero Arts, it doesn't cost you anything extra, and it really helps support this channel. Thank you so much. As always, I'm thrilled that you chose to spend a little time with me here, and I hope you enjoyed what I was able to come up with this month. Remember to click the thumbs up button at the top of this page. Let me know what your favorite cards are, and be sure to share this on your Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram pages. Please don't run with scissors. And I send you and yours love and light and happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.